And this is what they said in the World Book Encyclopedia. Stereotyping is the method of making type metal plates for use in printing. In the process, workmen set the type and lock it into a steel frame. A man called a stereotyper makes a thick paper or plastic mold of the page. He heats the mold until it becomes hard and dry. This mold, which is known as a matrix or a mat, is placed in a box face up. A workman pours molten type metal, mostly made of lead, over it. This hardens at once, forming a solid plate of type metal, and the page is printed from this. So that's what I did after school every evening. I would come to the News Chronicle. I'd go out in the alley to my little shack out there, and I would start getting this pig metal, they called it. They were little squares of mostly lead, and I would start putting those in that bowl. And then I'd light the fire under it and watch it melt. And then I would skim all the dross off of it. And when it was silvery, and then I had to pour it in this form. I still have scars on my ankles where that hot metal splashed on my ankles. And when he was teaching me how to do this, I said, well, I understand it all. I can do this. But I said, I have one question for you. I said, Mr. Boyer, how do I know when it's hot enough? Because he had just told me it had to be very hot. I don't see any gauges. How do I know when it's hot enough? He said, when you can see your face in it, it's hot enough. You know when God puts a stop to the trial? When Jesus can see his face in us. He turns the fire off. Fiery trials cause Christ to see him in us. I found a little poem that fit that about a stereotyper. He knew he had ore that could stand the test, and he wanted the finest gold to mold as a crown for the king to wear, set with gems with a price untold. So he laid our gold in the burning fire, though we fain would have said to him, nay. And he watched the dross that we had not seen as it melted and passed away. And as the gold grew brighter and yet more bright, but our eyes were so dim with tears, we saw the fire, but not the master's hand, and questioned with anxious fears. Yet our gold shone out with a richer glow, as it mirrored a form above, that bent over the fire, though unseen by us, with a look of ineffable love. Can we think that it pleases his loving heart to cause us a moment's pain? Ah, no. But he saw through the present cross the bliss of eternal gain. So he waited there with a watchful eye, with a love that is strong and sure, and his gold did not suffer a bit more heat than was needed to make it pure. That's why we suffer. God is working in us to make us like Jesus. And it's to humble us. 2 Corinthians 12, verse 7, lest, Paul says, I should be exalted above measure. Through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, a messenger of Satan, to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure. Trials are teachers. In my devotional book, I found this little story, and I'm going to take a moment and read it to you. Several years ago, there was an African mine and the most magnificent diamond in the world's history. It was presented to the King of England to blaze in the crown of state. The king sent it to Amsterdam to be cut. It was put in the hands of an expert lapidary. And what do you suppose the lapidary did with this magnificent diamond? He took the gem of priceless value and cut a notch in it. Then he struck it with a hard blow with his instrument. And lo, the superb jewel lay in his hand, cleft in twain, broken in two. What recklessness, what wretchedness, what criminal carelessness. Not so. For days and weeks, that blow had been studied and planned. Drawings and models had been made of the gem. Its quality, its defects, its lines of cleavage had all been studied with minutest care. The man to whom it was committed was one of the most skillful lapidaries in the world. Do you say that blow was a mistake? Nay, it was the climax of the lapidary's skill. When he struck that blow, he did the one thing that would bring that gem to its most perfect shapeliness, radiance, and jeweled splendor. That blow, which seemed to ruin the superb precious stone, was in fact its perfect redemption. Excuse me. For from those two halves were brought two magnificent gems, which the skilled eye of the lapidary saw hidden in the rough uncut stone as it came from the mine. So sometimes God lets a stinging blow fall upon your life. The blood spurts, the nerves wince, the soul cries out in agony. The blow seems to you an appalling mistake, but it is not. For you are the most precious, priceless jewel in the world to God. And He is the most skilled lapidary in the universe. And someday you are going to blaze in the diadem of the King. As you lie in His hand now, He knows just how to deal with you. Not a blow will be permitted to fall upon your shrinking soul, but that the love of God permits it, and works out from its depths blessing and spiritual enrichment unseen and unthought of by you. God is working in His people. In one of George MacDonald's books, there occurs this fragment of conversation. A woman, very depressed, angry at God because of her trials. She said, "I wonder why God made me," said Mrs. Faber bitterly. "I'm sure I don't know what was the use of making me." I've had people say that to me. "Perhaps not much yet," said Dorothy, "but then He hasn't done with you yet. He is making you now, and you are quarreling with the process." If believers would only believe that they're in the process of creation, and then be content to let the master lapidary shape you into a gem that God can love and keep. And Mr. Spurgeon said, "Not a single shaft can hit till the love of God sees fit." God will never allow more to come than you're able to bear. Hebrews 12:5, "My son, despise not the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of Him." Now that word chastening of the Lord is from the Greek word paido, and it means to train. To train. if God is chastening you with trials, it's because He's teaching you. He wants to teach you. That's what the word means. The word chastening means teaching. I've heard people say, oh, brother so-and-so, he's really having a bad time, lots of trouble. He must be doing something wrong. No, that's not the meaning of chastening. It can be. Chastening can come because of sin. Yes, it can. But on the other hand, not all chastening is sin. The Bible tells us that the word means teaching. God teaches His people, for whom my son despise not the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of Him. Verse 6, chapter 12. For whom the Lord loveth, notice that, for whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth. A proof of God's love to us. When I went through my heart surgery, I was learning something. He was teaching me something. So I didn't mind the heart surgery because I learned some valuable lessons. Verse 6 says, and scourgeth every son he receiveth. From the Greek word mastigo, it means to whip with a whip. Wham, 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 wham. And that's the way sometimes the blows came, like they did to Job. Then he said in verse 7, if ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? Chastening is an evidence of sonship. I used to spank my children. My father used to spank me. And today, I thank my father, my real father on earth. I thank him for every spanking he gave me. My school teacher said to me one day, Jack, you will either be a preacher or a prisoner. One or the other. I was sort of wondering. And she said, you'll either become a prisoner in prison or a preacher. She said, one or the other. Scourgeth every son he receiveth. That's all of us. Every son. We all go through a trial from time to time. Then in verse 8 he says, but if you be without chastisement, if God never chastises you, if He never spanks you, if He never whips you, if He never takes you to the woodshed, you know what that means? That means you're not one of His. You're not one of His. I've told this before to the church. I used to tell my children, don't you play in the street, because cars would roar down that street, and my children were small. I said, now don't you go out in that street. And I would come home, and as I turned the car around the corner and looked up the street, there they were out in the street playing with the ball. I said, okay, come on in the house. Oh, Daddy, don't whip us. I said, you know what I told you. So I had them bend over. I whammed them good. Real good. They quit playing in the street. It works. But if you be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye, the word is bastards in the 12th chapter, because in those days that meant an illegitimate son, or an illegitimate. If you were not a legitimate son, then you were, if you were not a legitimate son, you were just an illegitimate. You didn't belong to any father that would claim you. Behold, happy is the man whom God correcteth. Therefore despise not the chastening of the Almighty. I'm going to have to shorten this. Trials are our treasure. Verse 7, 1 Peter 1:7. Trials are a treasure. You say, I wouldn't want a trial for a treasure. Well, you don't know what you're missing. That the trial of your faith, being much more precious than of gold, that perisheth, though it be tried or tested with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. It's more precious than gold. It's better than gold. If God gave me a choice between gold and chastisement, I'd take the chastisement. It's a proof of my sonship. Life's day will soon be o'er, all storms forever past. We'll cross the great divide to glory safe at last. We'll share the joys of heaven, a harp, a home, a crown. The tempter will be banished. We'll lay our burden down. It will be worth it all when we see Jesus. Life's trials will seem so small when we see Christ. One glimpse of His dear face, all sorrow will erase. So bravely run the race till we see Christ. For I reckon, Romans 8:18, that the sufferings of this present time are not worthy to be compared with the glory which shall be revealed in us. The glory cannot be compared. Closing, verse 9, there's the termination